What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here. Today we're going to cover the Galion EL34 tube amplifier, pure Class A, 25 watts RMS, and it has a Class AB mode where you can juice that power up to 40 watts. Let's get those main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about some specs and standout features I felt are unique, interesting, or impressive for one reason or another, what the amp sounds like, how it compares to some other tube amplifiers, maybe what you can expect if you're upgrading from something that's more inexpensive, and then we'll wrap up the video. So let's jump into it. First and foremost, the wattage capability is fairly impressive, guys. Most tube amps in and around this price do not have this level of current driving capability. I promise you. I know there are other tube amps that claim as much as 40 watts. Pay attention to those. Oftentimes it doesn't say RMS, and that's a big difference. When the Galion EL34 tells you it'll do 25 watts in pure Class A, that's RMS. I was able to drive some pretty difficult loads to fairly loud volumes with this tube amp without even needing to switch it into Class AB mode. That Class AB mode is another cool standout feature in my opinion. If for one reason or another the 25 watts of pure Class A power aren't enough, you can engage Class AB mode and get up to 40 watts a channel RMS. Again, pretty impressive power and current driving capability. The amp does also have tone controls. That's a feature we don't see too often on tube amps that are purist pieces. Nice to see that. Auto bias circuit, very easy to use. Aside from that, it's mostly a purist piece. It does have a remote control, and it's about $3,000 plus shipping, so not too bad. Build quality is fairly impressive, as is the weight. This is not a lightweight amplifier. I'll leave a correction if I'm wrong. I want to say it's about 64 pounds. So the transformer inside, fairly beefy. So aside from that, look, build quality is great. If you know anything about Galion amplifiers, they're generally built really nicely, solid casework, usually lots of high quality power, and usually a really good value, right? That's usually what Galion goes for, is giving you more value for your money. And I'd say just based on the power and current driving potential alone, they've definitely delivered. Before I get into the treble, mid-range, and bass, let me quantify that for you a little bit. So I, of course, used easier to drive speakers for the bulk of my listening sessions, as you should when you're testing at a Class A tube or solid state amp that's low wattage, right? But I got curious. Nemo Propaganda thought to himself, man, I've got this pair of Arundel 1528 bookshelf speakers in for review that are 84 dB. That's pretty hard to drive. They're 4 ohm, right? They get low, and they're bass monsters. That's a tube amplifier's nightmare. That combination, any low wattage amp is going to want to cry. You give it a speaker like that. But I wanted to know what can the Galion do? Because I remember when I reviewed the Galion TS120 Special Edition, I was shocked by how powerful and muscular that amp was, and how, despite what its wattage was on paper, it seemed to have almost twice as much in real world use. I think I said something like, seems like tube watts just aren't the same as Class AB watts, you know what I mean, for whatever reason. And I don't know if that's specific to the Galion brand, or it is to some degree in my opinion, because I've heard some other tube amps that claim high numbers that don't do what this does. Anyways, back to the Arundel 1528. I connected it and I turned those speakers up to 85 dB with a bass heavy song. Okay. I'll leave some screenshots of the songs that I used. These are absolute bass monsters of songs. They get very low. Low bass sucks up wattage quickly. And I was getting clean output at 85 dB. I messaged Thomas on Facebook Messenger. I was like, dude, I'm abusing your amplifier right now. I'm using an 84 dB speaker that's a bass monster and 4 ohm. And he's like, oh man. He's like, is it performing, or did it run out of steam? And I told him it had no problems actually. And he was like, good. He's like, I put a really beefy transformer inside it, so I'm happy to see it paid off. And then out of curiosity, I'm like, how much louder can I get it? I cranked up to 87.5 dB. with those hard to drive monster speakers that tube amps don't like. Clean output, powerful bass, controlled bass at those levels. I could get it even louder, but I was not able to like hold on to like the high quality handling of delicate passages and like woofer control that I like. 87.5 dB out of a 25 watt Class A tube amp on a speaker that's 84 dB, 4 ohm, and a bass monster. That blew my mind. So rest assured, the 25 watts of Class A power this amp has is plenty. It performed more on par with like a, in terms of SPL capability and current, driving current, it seemed more like a 40 to 60 watt Class AB equivalent, right? But I digress. Let me tell you what the darn thing sounds like. So I have heard and reviewed and very much enjoyed the TS120 SE. So I'll review that. I'll do a comparison of that in a second. But overall, the EL34 was mostly neutral in my experience. It was mostly neutral. Sure, there's a little bit of extra sparkle up top, but not a whole lot. Sure, there's a little bit of warmth in the mid-range. Sure, it's holographic for a tube amp, yes, but not a whole lot of warmth, right? Bass control, shockingly good. Again, a little bit of warmth in the bass, not a whole lot. So I could see some people describing this as a little bit warm. Sure, I could definitely see a lot of people describing this as mostly neutral. Let's talk about those high frequencies though. High frequency treble was as you would expect from a Class A amplifier. It was sweet. It wasn't sharp with its attack, nor was it like soft and pillowy. It was good, clean, clear, high quality and highly refined articulate treble with good space and separation, good detail and good detail retrieval. I didn't have any complaints about the treble region. And if you want a little more or a little less friendly reminder, you do have those tone controls. The treble did have just ever so slightly extra amount of sparkle that really added to the experience in my book. Moving down to the mid-range, look, anytime we got a tube amp, we're going to get some holographics. It certainly brought that to the table. That's no surprise. Mid-range, ever so slightly warm. I had good imaging. I had a good sound stage. I had good clarity and texture within that mid-range. Again, no complaints. And again, one of the more shocking things that the Galion tube amps do is their bass power and woofer control. They are very shocking how well they can drive bass through a speaker and still hold on to that control. A lot of tube amps historically do have like good bass as far as like output, but it's a little more tuneful, if you will. It's not going to be as tight. It's not going to have that control. You generally need wattage for that or a lot of current. The Galion EL34 had no problem. Again, I told you, Arundel 1528 bookshelf, no problem, up to 87.5 dB in my room, you know. Of course, easier to drive speakers, I was not able to find the limit of this amplifier. Using something even 89 dB, which is not super sensitive, I could not find the volume limit of this amplifier. It was beyond what my ears are comfortable dealing with, even like when I'm testing. Because here's the thing, I can't use earplugs when I'm testing. I have to be able to hear distortion, breakup, and things like that. So I was able to get well over 90 dB with anything that was easier to drive, and even like 92, 94, 95. And then I called it quits. My ears couldn't take any more, guys. So the amp, mostly neutral, does the stuff tube amps should do, and has a little bit of extra sparkle in the treble. Just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. And the bass, strong, impactful, very well controlled. Its bass control, I would say, is going to be more on par with solid state. So how does it compare to its big brother, the TS120 SE? Because this is about $3,000 plus shipping. The TS120 SE is about $4,500, but ships for free, you know. And I think shipping for the EL34 is like $129 or $149. So it's not a big difference, you know, at least what the shipping adds. So pretty different in some ways, very similar in other ways. That bass control I told you about, the EL34, the TS120 SE is no different, and in fact can do it at louder volumes even. But they both have that really good, strong, confident, and well-controlled muscular bass that would have you think you're listening to a very powerful Class AB amplifier. Solid. They both have that little bit of extra sparkle in the treble region. What's different about the TS120 SE is it's a little bit more on the forward side. It's a little bit more resolving. It's going to dig into the recording just a little bit more and reveal just a little bit more detail. It's not a huge difference, but it's certainly there. The TS120 SE being a little bit more powerful will obviously be able to play even louder than the already capable EL34. Moving down to the mid-range, here I found a bigger difference. I found the TS120 SE costing, a good amount more money to be fairly more holographic, quite a bit more tonally richer and warmer. That's not to take anything away from the EL34. It was very good for its price category, but with the TS120 SE, we're adding another, $1,300, $1,400 to the price. We're going to expect that TS120 special edition is going to give us something for that money. And most of what it gives us is more output, a little more refinement in the treble, a little bit more detail in the treble, more output capability, and just a sweeter mid-range overall. That's more holographic and a little bit more expansive. Also, the treble on the TS120 SE, a little bit sharp with its attack, a little bit more resolution in those leading edges. So that's that comparison out of the way. I like both a lot. I'd say if you can afford either one, might as well go for the TS120 SE. If the price of the TS120 SE is just a little bit too steep for you, by all means go for the EL34. Both are supremely capable. And of course, you can tube roll either amp as much as you like and further fine tune that sound. I do not tube roll because tube rolling turns reviewing this one product into reviewing 3 or 4 products. Guys, I've had this for 90 days. I spend a crazy amount of time with products when I review them. I break them in for like 40, 50 hours, and then I listen for another like 10 to 30 hours. I really live with these products, so I can't, tube rolling, this would turn into a 6-month review for me if I was tube rolling, So let's do one more comparison. Let's talk about what can you expect. Actually, let's compare it to something, and then let's compare it to something or similar price, and then we'll compare it to a cheaper tube amp so you can see what you can expect if you're upgrading from something more affordable. Prima Luna Evo 100, I think that's $2,800. The Galion EL34 shipped to your door, I think it's going to be around like $31.49. So small price difference there, but near as makes no difference in my opinion. And once we get to this price, like $200-$300 is not a big deal. So look, the Galion EL34 is a larger tube amp. We just have to understand it. The Prima Luna Evo 100 integrated is fairly small. It's maybe 2/3 the width. It's much lighter. It's more of a compact chassis. It does not have as large of a transformer. So we cannot expect it to have the same current driving capability or output capability or bass control that the Galion EL34 has. Even though the Prima Luna Evo 100 claims 40 watts a channel, I'm going to go ahead and guess that's peak output because the Galion EL34 is 25 watts RMS and can play substantially louder than the Evo 100. The Galion EL34 has much more powerful bass and bass control. Both amps have a good amount of clarity. I found the Galion to have a little bit more sparkle to it, a little bit more shimmer, a little bit better separation, especially at louder volumes. At louder volumes, the Prima Luna Evo 100 starts to get a little bit unhappy figure, around like 85 dB with like an 87 dB speaker. The Evo 100 is not too happy. The Galion EL34 is like, let's keep going. Moving down in the mid-range, I found both amps that have similar amounts of holographics. I'd call that a tie. Similar amounts of like expansiveness, texturing, and layering in the sound stage. As far as the mid-range goes, I'd say the two amps are on par with each other. They're both really solid performers. The biggest difference is just going to come down to the Galion EL34 being a larger tube amplifier. And, this is one situation where going manufacturer direct is going to save you a couple bucks, and not really save you a couple bucks, but get you a little bit more performance for your dollar than buying a more traditional stereo component. I like both amps a lot, but if the size of the Prima Luna Evo 100 is not a selling point for you, like it being smaller doesn't hold value to you, The EL34 Galion, you know, you're getting significantly more bass power, bass control, and a little bit better treble refinement, sparkle, and detail retrieval on that top end. To me, it's an easy choice, but if the size or the weight, especially, I know some of my subscribers, I've talked to you guys, you're approaching retirement or you're deep into retirement. You're past the point where you can have very heavy components. I understand that. Even for me, you know, I'm 41, 60 plus pound amplifier. I got to be careful, make sure I'm lifting with the knees, keep the back straight. So if you're one of the older subscribers and just the weight's an issue, the Prima Luna Evo 100, again, may have more value to you for being smaller, more compact, more lightweight. As long as its current driving capability and wattage are enough for you, by all means, that's still a very good amp. Let's talk about what you can expect if you got something more expensive. I just reviewed the Wilsonton R300 Plus. That amp is $1,300 and it's fantastic. I gave it a lot of praise. What can you expect when you step up to something that costs more, like the Galion EL34? Well, I do think it's important to note out that's a pretty big price difference. $1,300 versus $3,149. And while both are big, beefy amps that weigh about the same, I do think it's important to point out the tube amps have slightly different tube complements. The Galion is EL34. The Wilsonton R300 uses 300B tubes, and they do have a big difference in terms of wattage. That Wilsonton is about 8 watts a channel. The Galion is 25 watts a channel. That is a big difference, right? So what are you getting for more money? Well, obviously you're getting a whole lot more wattage. There's a big difference between 8 watts a channel and 25 watts a channel. Guys, I use the EL34 with the Arundel 1528s. I would not do that with the Wilsonton. I would not even test it. I wouldn't. I would be concerned damaging the speakers. 8 watts a channel is not enough to drive a difficult load like that. You're going to risk damaging the speaker. You're going to run into distortion fairly soon. And that's understandable. No one should be pairing an 8 watt per channel tube amp to a difficult load. So flexibility is one thing you get. You're going to be able to drive much more difficult loads and to much louder volumes using something like the EL34. Finding the limit of the Wilsonton R300 was fairly easy. Like an average speaker, like a Bucard S400, a Totem Bison, a KEF R3 Meta, 75 dB, no problem. Bass heavy song, anywhere from 80 to 85 dB could be its limit, you know, if the song's got a lot of bass, because watts go quickly once you add bass into the mix. The EL34 Galion, however, it can drive those average to drive speakers like KEF R3 Meta, Bucard S400, Totem Bison to tremendously louder volumes and with superior bass control. So bass control is another thing you get when you spend more money with the EL34 Galion over something more inexpensive like the $1,298 Wilsonton R300. You're going to get a lot more expansiveness in the treble region and a lot better air space and separation in the treble region. That trend continues in the mid-range. More air, more space, more expansive in the mid-range region. So as far as technical capabilities, the Galion EL34 is going to be quite a big upgrade over something like the Wilsonton R300B. Tonally, the two amplifiers are very different, however. The Wilsonton R300B is a little bit warmer overall. Its bass is a little bit more tuneful. It's not going to be as tight. Whereas the Galion EL34, it's got more of a neutral sound. So if you don't necessarily care for the difference in technical capability, that airspace separation doesn't matter to you too much, or you're like, I want a more colorful sound, I could see some people being like, hey man, at $1,300, like, I know this is not as good as the Galion EL34, but I really enjoy this Wilsonton. The Wilsonton amp at $1,300 is an undeniable value in terms of what you get in for the money, but you certainly do get more when you upgrade to something like the Galion EL34. So I told you what it sounds like. I told you about standout features. We did some comparisons. I told you I was able to drive hard to drive loads and easy to drive loads. Let's see if there's anything else I want to tell you. Remote control is beautiful. Nice billet aluminum remote control. I didn't find a pairing of speaker and Galion EL34 that didn't sound good. It seemed to be a very flexible amplifier. Didn't seem to be too picky with what I plugged into it. It is a tube amp, guys. It is going to generate some heat. No surprise there. but it's got a monster of a transformer and you should be able to drive most loads. Now, again, I would not suggest you buy a Class A amp, tube or solid state, and intentionally pair it with 84 dB speakers. I would not suggest that. Easier to drive is always better for a tube amp. I'm going to go ahead and say anything normal, 87 dB is a good start. I'd like to always see tube amps paired to something 88, 89 dB or higher if possible. Oh, subwoofer outputs. It has subwoofer outputs. Let's not forget that. Huge standout feature. Absolutely huge. Most tube amps don't have subwoofer outputs for one reason or another. Galion gives it, whether it's EL34 or TS120 SE. That's another major difference it has over the Wilsonton R300B Plus. So, guys, I think that's the review. I think I've told you everything I wanted to tell you about the Galion EL34. I very much enjoyed my time with this amp. I've had it for 90 days. I have absolutely put it through its paces. I've used it with all the different speakers I have here. I could not find a bad pairing. It always sounded great. It always gave me a good, powerful, and well-controlled muscular sound that was expansive, detailed, and holographic. If you got any questions, holler at me in my free Discord or leave a comment below. But please remember, help me help you. If you want to know if this amp is going to be a good fit for you, tell me what your concerns are. If you're worried this amp might not be a good fit for your room, for example, tell me your room size in imperial units, please. If you want another comparison, you know what I mean? If it's just for funsies, ask that you don't do that. I don't like doing comparisons for funsies. I do the comparisons to help you make a decision. My goal is always to help you guys either just be entertained or stop obsessing, make a decision, and get back to enjoying your music. I hope that makes sense, y'all. Anyways, until next time, take care.